The ocean's cool air. I stared up and into the heavens. Stars dotted the evening sky, like little white splotches of paint haphazardly splattered across a black canvas by some wannabe artist, believing himself to be the second coming of Jackson Pollock. It reminded me of the type of piece one might find in a terrible surrealist art gallery. One where pretentious hipsters sip $2 chuck out of plastic cups, all the while hoping their idiotic interpretations of each exhibit will make others think they're more intelligent than they actually are. On a nearly moonless night, the tiny, twinkling specks of light were the only things illuminating the darkness brought on by the dusk. I had grown to look forward to nightfall. The days had become unbearable due to the constant bombardment of UV rays that I had been forced to endure. The evening's cool air tended to my damaged skin and gave me reprieve from the daily beatings I took from the sun. The night also provided constellations, which had become a welcome distraction. The stars told stories that helped me forget about the decrepit old lifeboat in the middle of the ocean that I was stranded in. I barely noticed the commercial fishing boat as it approached my dinghy, a testament to how far gone my mind had become from the weeks of isolation out at sea. Even to this day, I don't know how they managed to spot my tiny boat shrouded in the vast darkness of the open ocean. Hey there, are you okay? The young man was looking down at me from the bow of the ship. His piercing blue eyes almost glowed in contrast to the black sky behind him. Upon further inspection, I could see the whiskers that had begun to sprout from his face, as a result of going days without shaving while out on the water. As he scratched his stubbly chin, more of the crew crowded around the front of the boat to take a gander at me. I suppose a half-dead man marooned out at sea was the strangest sight they'd seen in quite a while. An honour I would hold for one of the briefest of moments. "He's alive," one of the fishermen shouted. "Let's get him up here now." As I watched the crew frantically buzz around the ship's deck, like a bunch of worker bees trying to figure out how to bring me aboard, a laugh escaped my mouth. Not a loud, bellowing one, mind you, just a tiny giggle. It was the irony of the situation that I found comical. Perhaps that last little chuckle was the humour centre of my brain finally fading from the weeks of emotional agony I had sustained. Going out not with a bang, but with a whimper, just a tiny giggle. It started with a loud crash across the starboard side of their boat. The fishermen struggled to retain their footing when the powerful impact caused their vessel to rock onto its side, nearly capsizing it. Shouts and expletives streamed from the mouths of the startled sailors as I watched them desperately try to make sense of what had just occurred. Another thunderous clang rang along the side of their ship, and this time it tipped. The once silent ocean air was now filled with the sound of chaos as the trawler smashed across the surface of the sea, flipping completely upside down and sending the men toppling overboard into the cold, murky water. I struggled to lift my head in order to peer over the side of my dinghy at the anarchy taking place around me. The fishermen barely had a chance to breach and catch their breaths before it began pulling them back down into the abyss. Their panic quickly intensified as one by one they started to realize their crewmates were disappearing into the deep, dark sea. You've never truly experienced pandemonium until you've heard a dozen grown men screaming for their lives in the middle of the ocean. The young man who had first greeted me from the ship's bow thrashed and kicked through the water, urgently trying to make his way towards my lifeboat. With salvation mere inches away, he flailed his arms wildly, reaching and grasping with reckless abandon, attempting to grab onto the side. I watched the hope in those piercing blue eyes of his turn to hopelessness as a black, sludge-covered tentacle wrapped itself around his ankle and yanked him back down under with one quick jerk. It was the fishing boat's turn now. Still submerged, the sea beast easily crumpled to the already twisted hunk of metal before sinking it down to the watery graveyard at the bottom of the briny deep. There it would join countless other vessels that had shared a similar fate. Without warning, the massive creature erupted from the surface of the sea. I wondered briefly if the salty taste of the water that splashed my face when the beast made its appearance stemmed the ocean itself or the blood of the men who had died in it. I shut my eyes, hoping not to catch a glimpse of its horrible features. The sound of water trickling around the Leviathan's body as it waded towards my lifeboat caused me to wince in fear. Though my eyes were clenched tight, I could still feel its awful presence as it closed in on me. I gagged and choked at the rancid smell of its hot breath forced its way into my nostrils and down my throat. With a thud, it dropped a mangled human limb across my lap, one of the fisherman's arms to be precise. It spoke only one word, the same word it had said to me many times before, and the same word it would repeat many times after. Eat. And with that, it slithered back into the sea, leaving me to myself again. I opened my eyes and stared down at the mutilated piece of flesh lying across my sunburnt thighs. For a moment, I was tempted to throw it back overboard, but thought better of it. Fearing retaliation from the creature for not listening to its commands for whatever reason, it seemed to want me alive, but I wasn't about to test its patience. I sunk my teeth into the skin and tore a chunk of muscle from the bone. It had been a week since I had last eaten. The hunger pains in my stomach helped to subdue the horrors in my mind and made the atrocity of cannibalism slightly easier. I let out a sigh and looked back up to the starry night. I was alone again, and once more only silence reigned over the ocean's cool air. Thank you all for listening. That was The Ocean's Cool Air by Vincent Venacava. Now let's analyse and break down this creepypasta. A link as always will be in the description for you to check out the original material. So this was quite a well written piece of fiction. It was very easy to read and narrate. I found the tirade about museums a little odd at the start, but you later find out this guy is pretty much isolated, so that's what would happen if you were alone. You would think about everything in extreme detail because you have nothing else to do. I also like the bait and switch. It could have easily just said, "I'm stranded at sea" in the first line, but this way builds it up. It makes it more impactful when you find out this guy's out here alone and he's been here for a long time. So that's good writing right there. It also helps to paint quite a graphic visual. At first he's just looking at the sky and it's night. So at night things are a little bit scarier, so there's a layer of fear there already. But then we find out he's at sea, so it's another layer of fear. And then we find out that he's alone and he's stranded in the middle of nowhere out in the ocean. And of course that sets a very isolated atmosphere. And then of course we have the big reveal where the creature comes up and destroys the boat, further adding to the hopelessness. Maybe this creature has missed him, maybe it's keeping him alive for some reason. Perhaps he's managed to stay alive just because it hasn't noticed him on his small dinghy. However, then we find out the horrible truth. This creature has at least the level of sentience to know that humans like helping other humans that are stranded out at sea. So it keeps this guy alive, almost as bait to reel in sailors as more food for itself. He even says that many boats are also down there, so this has probably happened a few times now. The creature even forces him into cannibalism to keep him alive, which of course is a very perverse thing to us humans. We don't like to eat one another. But under extreme cases of survival, we have been known to reluctantly do so on numerous occasions. One technical error that I noticed with this though is water. As I'm sure you're aware, you can't drink seawater. You will die very quickly if you do that. You certainly wouldn't be able to survive for a very long time out at sea under those conditions. Since humans are largely composed of water, I'm guessing you can extract some of that from eating flesh. But I doubt it would be enough to sustain someone's existence for very long, especially considering 3 days is about the maximum you can go without water before your organs start to fail. And he does say this is the first meal he'd have in a week, so I think technically he would still die even though he's eating this, and he wouldn't be able to drink the seawater. It would give him no nutritional value. But I can let that slide because everything else about this short story was very captivating and very interesting. I'm giving this a 4.75 out of 5. Make sure to give your own rating in the poll I've provided. Like this video if you did and you want to see more like this. Share it with a friend, and of course if you haven't already, subscribe for more creepy content.